Hi, it's Michèle from Jasami Publishing here with episode 7 of the Jasami Bookworm podcast. And today I am in my office and the weather is lovely and warm and we have blue skies and green trees and just trying not to melt at all. I am delighted to introduce my guest today. It's Freedom Matthews, who is an Instagram influencer as well as writer, all things book related. And we'll be chatting about the importance of books in her life. So welcome, Freedom.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. So first and foremost, the question we would like to ask is, how did you get such a beautiful name?
Well, everyone thinks it's a pseudonym, but it's not. It was my grandmother's name, and she is of Romany gypsy heritage, and so it all stems from that, Freedom of the Roads. And I have an aunt who's also Freedom, and then there's me. So there's many Freedoms in our family.
Oh, that's so wonderful to hear. I love to hear about family stories and where things relate from. So that's really, really cool. So the next question is very important for our listeners. When did your love of books arise?
I think it was very early on. I was a very early reader. I was surrounded by storytellers. My grandfather and my father, very avid storytellers were, and then I started reading very young, and I found the library and then the school library, and then I was sort of introduced to people like Paul Jennings and Roald Dahl, and it's just stemmed from there, and it's just grown bigger and bigger as time went on. And I was the youngest in my family, and my brothers are a lot older than me, so I kind of was an only child in the house, so books were my escape and my friends.
Yes, and that is when, as an only child, I was very much into books at an early age, but sometimes when you have siblings, it's a great way to escape, and the books that you first remember are so important, so important. Do you have a favorite genre, or has your genres that you may have loved changed throughout the years, ebb and flow?
They kind of adapt. My first love were always sort of adventure stories as a child. And then as I grew, my grandmother's only books she had in her house were like Mills and Boon or Harlequin romance novels. So I kind of got into those, which I probably was too young to get into those. And then I fell in love with fantasy. So, and my teens, it was biographies of things, people like Elvis or Judy Garland, vintage musicians and actors. But now my sort of mainstay is romance and fantasy. And if they both can come together, then that's brilliant.
A romantic fantasy and you're in heaven.
Exactly.
Do you have a favorite place you like to read with maybe a cup of hot chocolate? Well, not today, but little glass of something, that place that you love to bury away and read?
Well, I guess my bed mostly, but also we have a farm or a small holding, and taking it up, especially like a day like today, it's quite warm, somewhere shady, take my book, hide out, it's lovely.
And it's just so comforting. You get lost in a world, and to
Definitely.
have the peace and the quiet, and then you don't have the interruptions and jangling
Exactly.
and interruption of life and
Very
such.
true.
What is it about fantasy and romance that draws you in?
I think it is finding the reality in the fantasy and the fantasy in the romance. You kind of find, I'm trying to think of an example, but sort of I always go for sort of the human condition is my favorite thing, in any genre of storytelling, books, movies, podcast, anything. So human condition, seeing the reality in the fantasy. So of course this magical stuff could be going on, but seeing the crux of the situation is always great for me. And then with romance, of course, there's always the fantasy of the romance, which is not always true, but you can always escape into that swoony times. Hopefully that makes some sense.
The perfect romance, where, yes, there's, I think we often have that, when we're younger, and it's just, you grow up with it. What you said is very, very true. In the fantasy, it's the personalities and the characteristics that come out in the characters and in the story that are often more true to life in a fantasy than some, realistic books or, true to life.
And that's what I hope for.
So you not only love reading, but you also love writing. So when did that start? And what was the first thing that you wrote that you remember?
Well, growing up with my friends back then, we used to play in the street or play in your back garden, play outside, and we used to watch things, and my friends would play sort of, what's the word, live action fan fiction. So we'd take something we watch and then we'd adapt what we just watched in the garden. So that was kind of our own sort of play acting, I guess, but writing our own versions of things. And then my grandfather passed away when I was 11, and my school counselor told me to write out my grief, write out what I was feeling. And I started writing stream of consciousness poetry, which then in turn turned into books because I was loving books, of course. So I started writing, I think it was just a contemporary romance. And I was also trying to introduce my nephews into a condition I have, a heart condition I have. And I was trying to write children's fiction and I just couldn't do it at the time. So I just started writing YA. And it's just catharsis. It just came out of me. And then it just went from there. So from my very early on into my teens and sort of until now, I haven't stopped writing stories.
That is quite often you'll hear that it's very cathartic to write. Andrew Wilson, who does the poetry, he did that throughout school to help him cope with the situations at the time. Nat, and again, it was grief, and that was what she was told. So the creative process, it does, it's the outpouring of that, and it gives something back, which is absolutely wonderful. And amazing. It's almost like a runner's high. I don't run a lot, but I've heard about that. And it's how you feel about it when you're done. You just feel so much better, so much better. So now you've written a couple of books, and what were they about?
Well, my first sort of debut novel was about pirates and fairies. I've written some contemporary romance. My current sort of books are more fantasy based fiction. So I have sort of a Robin Hood meets Game of Thrones series that I've written on, and I've got stories based around folklore, like the Magpie, One for Sorrow, Two for Joy. That's currently being worked on, that I'm editing at the moment myself. Just lots of folklore and fantasy sort of mixed in with the reality that I mentioned. I try and get human condition with fantastical worlds. That's what I try and do.
The personalities and characteristics of your characters, do they have a little bit of you in them throughout the characters? Do you pull personality traits from other people and pop them in and mix them up?
I think we all, I'm not speaking for every writer in the world, but I think you have to put yourself into it in order to relate to the characters that you're writing. So yes, I think probably I'm in every character that I've written. Little aspects. A lot of the time I write what I'd like to be, so sometimes I'm a bit more confident or a bit more sassy than I am, or say things that I would love to say. But also, yes, I'm a big people watcher, I usually sit and watch people, and I can get inspired by anything. I can scroll through the internet or scroll through, so just see people walking down the street, and I'm like, that's a person I need to put into a book. Make up their story, And
freedom, you were talking about the characters and how we put certain characteristics in them that we admire. Are there any of the characters that you've created that you really admire, saying, oh, I'd like to be a little bit more like her?
Yes, Rua from my Evernote series, she's very impulsive and very forward, which I'm not. So I'd like to be more like, more like her. Lenny from my Inherited book, she's very confident and very out there. I was never very confident. I've started to get better as these things have gone on. So I try and write strong women because I'm surrounded by them all the time. And sometimes it's something you get inspired yourself as you're writing, like, oh, if she can do it, I can do it too. So hopefully readers do feel the same way, but you do it for yourself too. You're right. You're the first audience, aren't you, as a writer?
Absolutely. And we are our own worst critic as well. We write it. So you have a strong history in your family of stories, not just written, but oral. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about that? Because I thought it was fascinating.
It's hard to pinpoint exactly what to say and how to describe it, but because my dad my family were born on the road. My dad stopped traveling when he was 8 and settled. But before then, he used to take us on trips through the East and West Sussex, where he used to do hot picking and things like that, and describe tents coming and people coming to educate him intense and sort of, he did a lot of religious education through sort of these kaleidoscope amazing things, and how, you know, some not so nice things like people wanting to feed water to their horses but not to the children, and just all these different stories of good and bad of traveling. And it's just an amazing history to have, and one day I hope to write something around that. But yes, having heard good and the bad, of course, that just helps round out, you know, as a storyteller, hearing everything, because you don't want to rose color everything. Of course, escapism is great, but you have to have the gritty as well, the gritty reality of things, as I said, reality and romance.
And it's the balance, you know, it's when you're writing a story, they have to be they have to have something to strive for. And if they don't, there's no tension in the story itself. And that's one of the exactly one of the basic parts, tenets of writing. So writing's been an important part of your life. What's the easiest part of it for you?
Now, I don't want to sound too cocky because I know how hard it is for a lot of other writers too. Mine's getting it down. I'm quite a fast drafter. I've noticed that over the past year, actually. I can get them down. I can get words down. So that's easy for me. It's letting it go. I love to edit, so I can edit forever. So it's just getting it to people, to my critique partners, or just out to somebody else, and feeling confident. Imposter syndrome is a real thing. You get very worried if it's good enough, or, you know, etc. So getting it down is really easy, but the hardest part is letting it go.
They're like children. I don't have children, but my stories are like my children. And when you really know with authors, when they send you something, it's a new baby, and when you have to critique it, you don't want to tear it apart, you know, and everything needs to be edited, you know, even as a writer. But you don't want to over edit, because then you might take out something that's very good, that's a diamond in there. And so that's the difficult part, is recognizing it. So you'd say the most difficult part is letting it go.
Yes, I guess, yeah, I have great critique partners, and they're the ones that kind of say to me, okay, this is, you know, this needs to be done, this needs to be fixed, or this is great. So it helps you, or helps me at least, find my confidence in it. And then by the time we've gone through it, I'm like, okay, I can send it off now. I can send it into the world, and hopefully something happens, or not, whatever. It's just, but it's great to have those two people in my corner going, hey.
Absolutely. And someone who can be objective enough and honest enough to give that to you.
That's the pinpoint, the honesty, being harsh enough, or being able to know that you can be harsh with me as a writer, and me, them as critique partners, go back and forth. And yeah, understanding it's not personal, it's making the story better.
Exactly. And that's the way it needs to be considered. It's not a personal, you know, it's not personal to the author. It's about making that story the best it can possibly be. So writing and storytelling and such has been an important part of your life. How did that get you into the Instagram and being an influencer on Instagram?
Well, way back, as I said, way back in, I think, 2015, I was signed to a very small company that's no longer around, and they asked me to get into Instagram. I had Twitter and I had Facebook, but I didn't really do a lot with it. And then I found I was asked to get into Instagram, and I loved it. It's kind of my journal. It journals my writing journey, my reading journey. So things that happen and that I enjoyed. And I used to find it hard what to post, what people be interested in, you know, why would they be interested in what I was doing? But now I've kind of got into a routine. I try and do something that I'm reading, something that I'm writing, and something that I'm watching or crafting. Again, it's not about the audience or trying to find validation, but it's trying to find a network of people, or people that are like-minded and enjoy the same things I do, because I'm never better than when I'm writing and with bookish people. So, and I thrive in that community. So being part of that, even in a little way that I am, it makes my day better.
Absolutely. And when you have a group that are actually interested in the same thing, and books are an essential, elemental, key part of life. From the time we're small, and think of, you know, the first written word going back to, you know, Sanskrit and such, that people have wanted to communicate and put it down, whether, you know, back in the days when it was on a rock and then on papyrus and on paper, whatever it might be. It's so important because it's a part of communication.
Exactly.
And it's a way to communicate that you can do it. Stories are told, lessons are learned. So it is. And the way that you share it on Instagram is very important, I mean, because it when it comes across as friendly and people are open, and that's what strikes me about it, is that it's very, that you're very open on there, which
you try your hardest to, connect. And that's what, as I suppose that's me, the writer in me. I want to connect. So you connect through what you know.
Absolutely. So when you go for a fantasy story and want to create that, how do you go back to creating the world? Do you picture it in your head first and then it comes down, or is it created as you write it?
I started off life as a pantser, so writing by the seat of my pants. I used to just put it all down and then work in the edit. I've started to slowly come around to being a plantser, so I start of outline stuff and then I go and pants through that outline and then I go back and tidy it up. So yes, I usually just throw it all on. I sort of word vomit in a zero draft to begin with, and then I sort of build my world as my edits go through. This is probably why it takes me so long in the edit process, because I build it from the sort of the outside in, or inside out. Sorry, the inside out. I build it from the inside out, and that's where I kind of, the world is sort of half there, I guess, or a quarter there, and then I just build it up from the first brick, if that makes any sense. I'm mixing my metaphors.
Absolutely. It takes a strong foundation. Once you've got the foundation, then everything, it blossoms from there. So mixing my metaphors. But the other part is your characters. Now, I listened to a podcast once with two famous authors, and each was from a different school, about the characters and not their importance, but how they are. One of the authors said, the characters live in my head. They're real to me. And they tell me if I try to make them do something they shouldn't, the character will tell me. The other author was completely different, said, no, I control all the characters and they do exactly what I want them to do. Which line do you fall into, Freedom?
I think I'm a mixture, which is really a cop out. But what happened, I think of a character in Evernell, was a character called Roybin, and I was writing, and he was sort of a side character, just sort of in the corner, just popped up every now and then he got bigger and bigger and bigger, and his character sort of became a bigger part throughout the. Again, it wasn't necessarily the main characters, but he was kind of going, hey, I've got things to say. Can you add me a little bit more? And another thought just popped into my head when my CP sort of mentions, oh, how about this? Sometimes I'm like, my character wouldn't do that. They wouldn't say that. They wouldn't do this. And it's so I kind of maybe embody them a little bit. I'm like, oh, they wouldn't do that. I understand who they are. So not necessarily in like an anti-editing way. That sounds terrible, but no, it's just like, oh, so-and-so wouldn't say that. That wouldn't be something she would say. It might be XYZ character, but not this person.
Because what the characteristics they do have, what they live with it, if you're trying to have them, put them in a certain situation and have them do something that seems out of character, no pun intended, but that it will. And they evolve through the story, they change, they develop as as all the characters do. As a writer, and I would say seasoned writer, because you've been published and you've had a few books and written, and the more you write, the more seasoned you do become and better at it. What advice would you give to young authors, young writers who want to write and develop? What are a couple of tips that you would give to them?
My biggest, and I'm looking at it right now, which is write the book. I've got a big sign on my wall saying write the book because it's the hardest part. You have to, as you said earlier, have the foundation. You can't do anything unless you don't have the story down. So the first foremost, get it finished. Just finish something. Have that achievement, celebrate it. You finished, you've written that book. Then I think the second thing would be, yes, to edit the book, work through it, have someone look at it, someone you trust, someone who's going to be honest with you, and then work together to build that, or at least ask them for some feedback. And that's where I came from. That's where sort of my biggest things, getting it down and getting the feedback, because you can, writing's a lonely job because you can write in a vacuum. You can you could think, oh, I'm writing the best thing in the world one day, and the next you could be writing the worst stuff in the world. And it's someone out there who maybe is another writer, another reader, someone that you trust, can tell you that, hey, I'm not liking this, or someone else can say, I love it. Again, it's subjective, but yeah, they're my two big things. Write the book and then write and finish it, and then find someone to critique it for you, because
That's excellent advice, because if you have a good, strong foundation and then you know where it's going, and someone reviews it, it might take a different kind of tangent or avenue that you hadn't considered before that will make it just that much of a better story. And it's nice when you have that trusting relationship, as we said earlier. Very important to trust the person that will review, and be honest about it. What do you see in the future? I'm going to say, let's bring out that crystal ball for Instagram and writing for you. I don't say 5 years, but, in the near future, just, a few months down the road, are things going to be changing? Are you working on a new project?
So for social media side, I'm starting to feed into Book Talk. I've love watching it. I'm kind of been a voyeur. I'm starting to slowly dip my toe in the water, getting a little bit, having fun with it, basically. Just, it's a sort of a long form or a video version of Instagram for me. So it's just, again, following my journey on there, trying to, again, for me, it's like a journal. I journal my writing life and my reading life on there. So that's what I'm slowly starting to do. So that's my next goal, trying to see what I can discover or learn about myself through that medium. And it's also very inspiring seeing other authors and other readers on there. It's just amazing. So it's another avenue for networking, to meeting new authors and reading new books. And writing, I'm working on editing my Magpie book and my Project Fox book. And I've got some other new projects that I've been plotting recently. So it's a lot of, I don't stop really. That's what I do. I continue to write and power forward, and that's my plan.
So writing is a key part of your life, and you said that you've got a firmer place to go. Is there something else that you enjoy when you're taking a break from writing and reading?
Yes, I love to crochet or knit. But in this weather, it's horrible right now to do any of that. So yeah, I love sort of crafting in general. So, anything that I can keep my hands busy while I can maybe listen to an audiobook. So that's still reading. But I also we have a small holding, a farm. So I spend some time with my horses and my chickens and just be quite, I guess, old school and quite old fashioned. But I do enjoy just sort of the simpler things in life, just taking time just for a walk, or, spending time with my animals. I enjoy it.
Back to nature. There's absolutely nothing wrong with back to nature at all. Not at all. So because that's another form of creativity when you're relaxed, and then you can think of new characters, because I know when I'm out, I keep thinking of, if I'm working on a writing project, and it lives with you. So you're always considering the different options and things that you would do. I think the Book Talk is really interesting as well. That's something for exploration kind of thing. Social media, it's always a growing concern, because it's, Twitter has its place, and, TikTok has its place, and the people that visit it. So podcasts and such. So it's all very important with different types of social media. Also, it's great when you're at the farm, you can also listen to a little podcast. See, perfect.
Exactly.
Absolutely perfect.
Exactly what I do. Excellent.
That's wonderful. We love to hear that. So, Freedom, thank you for taking time out of your day to share it with our audience. And I think it's so important for people who are out on Instagram, just to, when you put a voice behind it, because that gives it a little bit more of the personality of who you are, and such a lovely person, and to express ideas. And we're always looking for others, if they have an interest and know someone who might be interested in joining us for our podcast. We love that. So thank you for joining us today. I would like to ask you, who would you like to do a shout out to?
It's probably because I was speaking about them so much, I'd like to shout out my critique partners. Charlotte Selby, who isn't on social media much anymore. She used to be a book tuber and a blogger back in the day. She's amazing. And also Matt Hay, who is a Scottish author who writes medieval zombie horror as well as fantasy. He's amazing. So both people are great. So hi guys. Thank you for everything.
Excellent. It's always wonderful to have that personal touch. We'll make sure it's in there. So we'll have your Instagram on the description for more people who want to follow you along. I would like to do my shout out is to all of the young writers. Just take the advice that Freedom has offered. It's so important. Lay down that foundation and don't stop. Don't ever stop. So with that, what I'll say is our next episode the interview will be with Holly Richards, and she is the illustrator with us, which is wonderful. And we'll talk all about all things artsy and to do with books. So don't forget to download and stay tuned for the next episode. I'd like to say cheerio.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Freedom. We appreciate that. And here it is, Michèle from Dasami Bookworm Podcast. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to hearing from you in the not too distant future. Wishing you a sunny week as always.